I'm really thrilled this afternoon to be talking to you about mastering the imposter syndrome. This is the A to Z of banishing the imposter syndrome. And you'll see why it's A to Z shortly. And so a simple guide, I call it, as to why you might feel a fraud. But sometimes I put it in brackets because I'm not here assuming that all the women on this call or those listening to the recording feel a fraud all the time. But I have had times where I've gone, they're going to find me out, this can't be right. So I've no doubt that some of you have feel the same. And so that's what this is about. Studies say that up to 70% of people at some time or other feel like they're an imposter. So I've got a guide based on the letters of the alphabet A to Z. That's not difficult to work out. And so here we are at the first letter, which I've cheated, so I've got two. So awareness, and you can see here, I think for any issue that we may want to, we've got concerned about, or personal development things, actually being aware of having a problem, having an issue, or having some concerns is the first step to doing something about it. And once you're aware that this, some people call it a monster, this thing can pop up occasionally, then you're definitely in the right position to make some sort of changes. When we're oblivious to it all, we think it's all about us. We take it on as something that just affects us and nobody else, that it can become a real challenge. The other A I like is arrogance, and that's because I worked in a very male-dominated organisation in the police service, lots of blokes in there. Yes, I know, and I'll talk about this later, that men can suffer from the imposter syndrome, but they've got this way, many of them, of just having this huge amount of self-belief and that they can do anything. So my encouragement is to try and be a little bit more arrogant. And that's really not about arrogance, that's more about owning your abilities, being able to sell yourself, understanding that you have got some amazing qualities. And if you are able to do that, it doesn't mean that the next stage is you're going to be a prime candidate for The Apprentice and some of those people that perhaps, if you watch that program, we're not too keen on. Just because you know that you have strengths and you're good at things and you're amazing at what you do doesn't mean you're suddenly going to turn into a prime candidate for The Apprentice. So that's my A. So this is how we're going to go, really. So believe in you. That's my B. There are thankfully lots of very famous, talented and amazing people who will start to talk about having the imposter syndrome. And I think that's really good, because for me, certainly, well, if she can think that, Michelle Obama, if she thinks she's got a touch of the imposter syndrome, then I feel okay in that category. So believing in ourselves is key to this, something maybe that we're not always terribly good at. I can't do anything without plugging my own book. So when I left the police service, I thought I'd be a full-time mum. Not very good at that. Not as good a cook as my present husband, apparently. For want of something to do, I jotted down some what I thought were funny stories about me and my girls' drama and crisis. But it was a personal development model because, those of you in the Swib Tribe will know that personal development is really, really key to what we do every month at our meetings. And that book is a personal development model. And celebrating your success, I think, is key. The underlying all of this is confidence. And as long as we can recognize our successes, and they don't have to be huge, the smallest of successes, recognize them and own them, it increases your confidence. When you think back at the amazing things you do, I'm looking at my screen, I can see Carly. Carly started a brand new business in lockdown. Oh my goodness, how amazing is that? So those sort of successes, to celebrate them, because every small one is on the way to a large success. So I think that C is really important, and I love celebrating. I'm going to have afternoon teas next month, so that'll be a good way to be celebrating too. The D is going to come up quite regularly. I'm sure a number of you will have read that amazing book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But I talk about doing something brave, because to increase your self-confidence, if you're invited to give a presentation, by me sometimes, and you've never done it before and you're terrified, what do? Say no, or I hope say, yes, of course I will, Jill, and then worry about that bit later. The minute we start taking ourselves out of our comfort zone, then we start stretching ourselves, and it will, all of this will increase your self-confidence. Now, when I say do something brave, I don't mean do something stupid, but this is not about doing major things. It is something like that presentation. It's stepping out of your comfort zone. And often I hear women say, oh, I've been asked to do this and I'm really terrified, and I've said, no, I'm not going to do it. If somebody asks you to do something, whether that's in business, in your personal life, if you're an employee, that's usually because they think you're good. They think you will be able to do this, and they have belief in you. Because I certainly wouldn't ask anybody to do a presentation at our network if I thought they weren't going to be very good. So it's about increasing self-confidence, all of this is, and that's a really good way to start. And if you haven't read the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, I certainly recommend it. Why is it important? Well, if I go back to that police scenario that I mentioned to you, the impact of the imposter syndrome when it pops up for us is that women and men, but often women, will just not put themselves forward. So I knew that there were some amazing, amazing women in our organisation when I was in the police service. I knew they were brilliant at what they did. I saw them working on a daily basis. But when the opportunities came up for promotion or to do attachments or to generally opportunities, they were just not putting them forward. And one of the main reasons that women don't put themselves forward is because they tend to think they have to be perfect before they do. But it really is, the research talks about women particularly understating their skills. You know, we're going to come on to language a bit later. It talks about this syndrome, meaning that you think someone's going to find you out, so we're not going to do that. Don't put myself into the spotlight. Don't do this. I don't have the ability to do this. And so often you have. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's worth finding out more about it and trying to change if it's impacting on you. And I'm guessing you have some experience if you're here today listening to me talk about it. So my F is focus on something else. I've said there, stay away from perfection. Don't wait to be excellent at something before you put yourself forward. I often talk about, perfection up here and excellence is down here. You can be excellent, you can be good, you can still bring value. And back to something I said earlier on, if someone's asked you to do something, it's because they believe in you, because they think you have the skills and abilities to do it. So think about it. The research, which I'll talk about when we get to R, interested me particularly because the actual research that brought this imposter syndrome, it was called the imposter phenomenon then, into the headlines was research done in a Georgia State University, and it was high achieving women that the research was done on. It wasn't people at a lower level. And these are really skilled, highly qualified women. And that's where the researchers found these characteristics. So if you're suffering from this, there's a good chance that you're a bit of a high achiever anyway, because it certainly impacts on high achievers more than anybody else. My G is get off the pedestal. It's a bit more about that perfection, thinking that if I do this, then people aren't going to think so much of me, maybe. But, you know, we talk often in our development sessions across the network about going for it, stretching yourself. So I would say forget that self-importance and you won't feel as much of a fraud. It's you, we're all individual, to help you in this area. Be you and give it a go. That's another G, isn't it? Give it a go. I might do that one. My H is have a plan. A very, very well-known saying, quote there from Benjamin Franklin. And we've had sessions around planning and the importance of planning. I've got to tell you, got a habit in the past. I hopefully don't do it so much now, of winging it. I've got a lot of confidence, self-confidence. I haven't always been like this. That was because I had to put on a uniform and walk the streets and do all sorts of things. It didn't mean I wasn't terrified, but that gives you lots of self-confidence. The downside of self-confidence is you think you can wing everything. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So as much as I want you to push yourselves and step out your comfort zone and do things you haven't done before, I really want you to plan it, because that really does help. Don't plan it to perfection. Don't plan it to the finest degree. I've got my notes here to keep me going, but I'm not going to sit and read them out to you. A, that's going to be quite boring for you, but that also doesn't bring in the, a bit of me into what we're doing and give a different perspective. And hopefully every time we do it, it's slightly different. The other downside about me is I'm not really a completer finisher, so I've had to get much better now. I'm used to having a team of people around me in the old days who would, somebody be a project officer, somebody else would do this, and now most of the time it falls to me. So having a plan and working it through to the end is really important, and that will make you feel less of an imposter if you're following your plan. And be good at what you do. Finish stuff. Don't be shiny bright object person. It's very common. I said earlier on, apparently 70% of people feel like imposters at one time or another. And they did some research, I think it was in the 80s, said that 2 out of 5 people, men and women, can experience this. So it's, I think that's one of the benefits of a network. I remember back to a police force when I had got to quite a senior level, going on a senior leadership course. It was just for women. It was actually the first one they ran. And I was amazed when I sat with a group of women at similar levels that they were feeling exactly like I was. And so often, I think, particularly if you work in your own business and you work alone, or you're the director of your own company and you might have some other staff that work to you, but you often can become quite isolated. That's sometimes why people join networks, is about the isolation. And we can forget that other people can feel the same. And I think that's quite reassuring to know that it is very common and lots of people do feel the same. So, Jay, just fake it. Acting as if. It's a common, prescription, I suppose you'd call it, in psychotherapy. And it's based on the idea, if you behave like the person that you want to become, you'll become this. So if you go around smiling and acting as a happy person, you'll become happy. If you want to get more work done, act as a productive person. I certainly think that's true. I think, I've often talked to people about, when we can feel a bit down. I'm not talking about serious depression, but if you can feel a bit down, just smiling at people, and inevitably they will smile back. You can change your whole temperament. You can change how you feel. I'm a strong believer in how we feel comes out of our own heads. And I did it just the other day, having a bit of a down day, like we all did, put on a bit of music, and all of a sudden I'm singing along and the whole thing changes, doesn't it? So yeah, just fake it. So if you want to be confident, act as a confident person. If you're terrified of doing presentations, do one. Even if you just practice with one other person and then you move on to more people. But fake it till you make it, I think, is a really good idea. This is a particular favourite of mine. A box of affirmations. I have what I call a blues box. I've had it for many, many years. It's a box up on my shelf there. And it's not as pretty as this one, but it has in there all those little thank you notes and the days when people gave you thank you cards, the emails, the lovely testimonials. You all get them. We all do. Keep them. And then if you're having a bit of a down day, you open your box and you read them and you remember that all those people think you're amazing. When you've done a really good job for somebody and they send you amazing testimonial, we all know from a marketing perspective, it needs to be on the website or your Facebook page or wherever your audience is. But keep a copy, because it's very easy to forget when things don't go right, and things don't go right all the time. It's really easy to forget that. So keep your blues box and open it regularly. Another hero of mine, Sheryl Sandberg. I'm not terribly keen on the organisation she works for. For those of you that don't know her, she's the COO of Facebook still. And this is Lean In. She started an organisation called Lean In, leanin.org, if you want to find about it. She wrote a really good book about leaning in. And I think that's really true. Fear is very much at the root of many of the barriers that women do face. Fear of not being liked, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of all those things that you can see there, fear of failure. I do lots of assertiveness training, and often people talk about fear as the reason to stopping them doing things. And I think it's really, really important. So Cheryl talks in her book, and I really do recommend that, about it's her own personal stories and her research, that women can find themselves around a boardroom table, but they often won't speak up. And this whole concept of what we can do to help ourselves and lean into the world that we want to be in, and speaking up and having voices and being heard. And that if we don't do that, we will keep ourselves small and we'll keep ourselves in the background. Okay, and then I mentioned earlier on, men can feel it too. And if we say that 70% of people can feel it at any one time, 2 out of 5, whatever the numbers are, then that's very likely. My old boss talked about it. He was the chief constable at the time. He had 3 daughters. He was hugely supportive of the work that we did. But he would often talk about the imposter syndrome and being found out one day, and sometimes walking into, in those days, a bit different now, but you know, the big office and executive assistants and personal assistants and all these people waiting to hear what you've got to say, and go, I can't believe this is me. How did this happen? And I really do understand that. I felt like that quite a few times. But what I've got here is an interesting study I found when I was doing some research for an article some months ago. It's come out of America. They're really good at writing about this sort of stuff. It's a woman called Rekha Bordawi. And this research, they told half of the students that they had got the first 5 questions wrong in an exam, regardless of how well they performed. Some of the students were also told that their professors, their tutors, I suppose, in our scenario, would be shown the results. And what she found in this study was that men with the highest level of imposter feelings performed worse after receiving that negative feedback, whereas women's performances improved, which I thought was quite interesting. But she thinks that there is a norm for men to be competent high performers, and maybe there isn't that much of an expectation of women to be high performers. So it didn't impact on women so much, but men definitely feared a backlash and would self-sabotage, and this would really have an impact on them. So I just thought that's interesting to understand that for those of us that are working potentially with men or living with them or whatever it is. Okay, my N is never, never, never suggest your success is down to luck. So there's a quote you may well have heard, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I have often heard women talk, particularly that Springboard program that I talked about. So this is a development program, and I've run these open programs in the past before I started the network. And every one of the programs would have a speaker, a bit like the speakers that we have, but they would be talking about their journey. And the amount of times I've heard high achieving, successful women talk about luck and how lucky they are to be in that position. And I'm not saying there is no such thing as luck, but in reality, we make our own luck. And so many of these women were in the position they were in because they worked bloody hard, or they were really good at what they did. But they still seem to say it was about luck. Yes, we can all get help. We can all get support in our journeys, but we tend to only support people and help people that are worthy of it. And inevitably, your success, whether that's in your business, in your organization, or whatever it is you're doing, is going to be down to your hard work and what you've put in. And if there's any luck in it, that's probably because you've taken an opportunity, which is what I would always suggest that you do. Something I think that can be quite common, particularly in business. So this is overcoming the need to compare yourself to others. Quite a nice quote there that I like about the sun and the moon. I do hear business owners often, particularly new business owners, comparing themselves. And I get it because I do it myself. I've just earlier on was looking through LinkedIn and saw people I know really well in another network, and there's awards and they're starting this and they're doing that. And you think, oh, I'm a bit behind the curve, or they're doing better than me. Too often, we will compare our start or our middle journey to somebody that's been doing it for years and years. It's not helpful to compare ourselves to other people. Going back to what I said earlier on, we're unique. We all bring ourselves. We've had our own journey. We've had our own experiences. Try really hard not to compare yourself to others. In terms of networking, there's lots of other networks around for people to join to. Many of our members are members of more than one. But concentrate on what you do what you do well, and try really hard not to compare yourself to others. Appreciate your own amazingness, because you're all amazing. Another thing I love talking about is compliments, which is why I put in what this old thing. How many of you will be thrown a compliment? I love Joe's green top. I can see that at the top of my screen. I'm sure Joe's not good. There you go. I can see she's mouthing, thank you.
Thank you.
But, I mean, I love doing this. I'll do this to complete strangers in the toilets. I love your dress. I love whatever you're doing. And many times when you say that to women, oh, it came from a charity shop, or it was in a sale, it was something to put down instead of just a very nice thank you. I think a good way to think about this is to think about a compliment as a gift. And if somebody gives you a gift, it's unlikely that you're going to give it straight back to them. So think of a compliment as a gift and practice accepting the gift. Right. Quit suffering in silence. I think it's more and more common for women to, particularly in the current situation that we all find ourselves in, and we find ourselves in pretty horrendous situation, don't we, at the moment, is to carry on and keep going. And so I know we've got lots of members who are running businesses and homeschooling children and worrying about parents and doing all sorts of things. And they're also really, really bad at asking for help. And that quote for me just says it all. Certainly it's my view. Helping others isn't a chore. It really is one of the greatest gifts. So if you need help, if you need advice, if you need support, if you are struggling or juggling, or whatever your word is, then ask for help. This network is a good place to go, but most of us have got our own support network. And people really do love to help. So rather than holding on to secret fears, speak to a special friend, speak to somebody you know in the network. And I am guaranteeing that whoever you talk to, especially if it's a woman, will have exact experience of what you're going through. And it makes such a difference. I remember, as I say, that leadership course that I went on many years ago, the challenge of being in a group of what I perceived were 11 other amazing, successful women. And I had the whole imposter syndrome. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what I'm doing here. And I've got this woman who worked in the Metropolitan Police, and she led the negotiator. She really worked at a high level. And I'm sitting in what would be the equivalent of a breakout room, talking to her. And within minutes, she's in tears, talking about the challenges that she had and how she felt. I had absolutely no idea. And I listened and I supported, and I, at the end of the day, walked away thinking, blimey, it's not just me. And so many of us think it's just us. So there's my cue: quit suffering in silence. The research I mentioned earlier on, this is the original research that the imposter syndrome that many of us talk about now is based on. And it was that research done by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Ims at the University in Georgia, and it was called then the imposter phenomenon. And it was a research into high achieving women. And they found that these women tended not to believe at all that they were intelligent. And most of the time thought that for appraisals and that sort of thing, they were being over-evaluated for all sorts of reasons. And they picked out 4 areas that I'm just going to refer to here. Diligence, and in their words, gifted women often work hard in order to prevent people from discovering that they're an imposter. And that, obviously, because you work really hard, leads to more praise and success, which perpetuates these feelings that they're going to be found out. So it's some sort of vicious circle there. And they found that these women felt they needed to work 2 or 3 times harder. And they were always over preparing, and they were always tinkering with fine details. They were always searching for perfection. So that's diligence. Obviously, the downside of all of this is you're in a position where you're talking about potential burnout, not sleeping well, and anything else. So this is definitely not a win-win. Feelings of being phony, and that's quite common when people these days talk about the imposter syndrome. But they found in that research in 1978 that these women were often attempting to give their supervisors and their professors the answers that they believed they wanted. And that often led to an increase in feeling of fake. Use of charm. I thought this was interesting. Many gifted women often use their natural perceptiveness and intuition to use charm to gain approval from supervisors and seek out relationships that help them. And they would be really charming and act in a way that they felt people expected them to behave. And I have to say on the side here, I think that can still be the case. So the outcome of that is when they were evaluated very well, when people praised them, they thought that was because they were charming. That was absolutely nothing to do with their skills and their abilities. And the final one was avoiding a display of confidence. And I equate that to something I was brought up many, many years ago. Little girls should be seen and not heard. But often is if you avoid showing confidence in what you do, if you sort of don't lean in, if you keep yourself small, then there won't be any criticism. That's quite common. And what I'm saying is that we need to be self-confident to overcome these feelings, and we need to show confidence. One of my other favourite subjects is assertiveness. And I run lots of courses around assertiveness, and that is a continuum which goes from passive to aggressive. And assertiveness is nicely in the middle. And so often women think that being assertive is aggression. And I have to say that some of that is because of the feedback they will have had, because I've had that myself, and I think it's still not uncommon in lots of organisations, that if you speak your mind, if you make eye contact, if you're confident in what you say, then some men will see that as aggression. And it's not, it is assertiveness. Anyway, that's a separate subject, a separate little hobby horse of mine. So we'll move on to slow down. And I think slow down is really important. When we get anxious, everything can speed up. And if we are worried about imposter syndrome and if our confidence is lacking, it's really important to take time to breathe, to try and talk more slowly. Not so easy when you've got lots of slides to get through, but it really does make everything calm down if you can talk more slowly and breathe. I like that. Okay. Take more risks. Another favourite saying, do one thing every day that scares you. Why? Well, it's a bit like doing something brave. Taking careful, calculated risks, not just being random risk, is much better than sitting on the sidelines and worrying about what happens if I do this. I wonder what will happen if I do this. And I know that's a challenge now because we are in a situation that is unprecedented, to quote the usual phrase. But it really, doing something brave, taking more risk will help your confidence increase, providing it's a plan and not jumping in with both feet without having any thought about what you're doing. I'm sure none of you would do that. But doesn't it sound more fun to say that you're brave and not scared? And fun is definitely really important. So are you? Understand your true worth. And a quote here, a couple of quotes that I think is interesting. But I think failure is something that so often has got a really negative connotation. Kids fail at all sorts of things, but don't think about it. They just get up and carry on. But the true sufferers of the imposter syndrome, apparently, are said to be unable to internalize their successes, what I was talking about, celebrating and owning. And so if that is you, then it's really important to recognize where you got to and how you got there, and understand your true worth, because we are all amazing. You are all amazing, and you run your own businesses or you work in organizations, and you're doing what you're doing because you're good at what you do. And we have to believe that. Linked to that, not something I'm going to talk about, is about charging your worth, because I think, again, that is something else that women aren't always terribly, terribly good at. Visualize success. I love visualizations. So an American psychologist, there's a lot of the research around the imposter syndrome comes out of America. This is a guy called Donnell. So visualization, really straightforward, just that whole perspective about imagining success at what you're going to do. So if you're going to do a presentation, then closing your eyes and thinking hard about what it would look, what success looks like, what it will be like when you've done that presentation, what it will be like when that presentation goes well, not concentrating on whether walking on a stage and your dress is tucked into your knickers or whatever else the terrible thing you're going to feel. You're going to fall off the stage. And, you know I've gone up and down on quite a few stages and it can be quite terrifying, but to visualize the success is really, really, it's what athletes do all the time, and other successful people. They spend a huge amount of time meditating and thinking about what that is going to look like. And it's not just, well, I think I'm going to be really good at that, but actually the fine detail. Because let's talk about presentation. If you think about the fine detail of that presentation going well, I'm going to get a standing ovation, or I'm going to get comments from people that are really positive, and people are going to send me messages, and they're going to ask lots of questions, setting myself up now for the question and answer scenario when you all go really quiet. But just visualizing what it will be like for success in that particular area. If you think about those fine details, then the chances are you will get there, and that's what it will be like. And I know a number of you on the call are huge believers in the law of attraction. You know, this whole idea that we bring to us, the success around us is what we do. And so visualization is really, really good for that. Workplace opportunities, that's a W, because when I first started doing this ebook, it was very much focused at women working in organizations, because that's where I had been. But I think this also applies in business, certainly in the workplace. I said at the start, the challenge for some women was they wouldn't apply for opportunities. They were waiting until they knew 100% what they had to do. When so often something like an attachment to a different part of the organization, you're going there so that they can share with you how that works. Not because they're expecting you to be an expert in that field already. If you're an expert in that field, you don't need it. But this is about looking for those opportunities. And I think we have a great opportunity within our network to collaborate with others. And I know a number of you do and have collaborated with others. And, you know, if somebody approaches you and talks about collaboration, is your first thought, oh my God, she's amazing, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that? Or do you think, oh, that's a great opportunity, shall I give that a go? And just by starting those conversations, is how we increase our confidence and obviously increase the opportunities for success. And we talked about luck before. Putting yourself in that position, in that place, is likely to be much better for you. It's going to be better for your business, and you never know what could be around the corner. And that's the most amazing thing, I think. What is around that corner? I've been a bit creative with the X. Sorry about that. Couldn't think of words that began with X that would fit this. So we've used explode those limiting beliefs. Most of us have limiting beliefs. Some of them carry them around with us all the time. Some of us have had limiting beliefs and have now found a way to free ourselves from them. It's that negative parrot, and it might not sit on your shoulder all the time, or it might, sadly. Sometimes it might just crop up in certain circumstances. But the key to this is reframing. So if you know you've got a limiting belief, I'm no good at maths, I'm no good at presentations, that keeps popping up, doesn't it? It's probably because I'm often talking to women about doing presentations and they say no to me and I want them to try. But it's It's reframing those thoughts. If you've got a continuous thought that pops into your head at certain situations, be aware of it and do what you can to change it. I might not be hugely brilliant at doing maths, but I can do a course, I can get help, I can put myself in a position to do better. I will never succeed. I've heard somebody say that before. But if we hang on to these beliefs that often come from childhood, it might be partners that we've been with for a number of years, and you know, that constant drip, drip, drip will hold us back. Explode those, find a new way, think about what you're good at, think about what's positive. Where is the evidence or proof is the key one that this is the case. Are they your truths or are they somebody else's? So thinking about them, finding ways to change them, reframing, changing all those sentences. And once you've changed the belief, try it on and act in a way, back to act as if. You can be successful. You are all successful. You're here. You have those great successes already. So lose that negative parrot. That's not easy, but it can be done. And there's lots of other people around that can help you with that too. Yes, mistakes, a bit like failure. We're all allowed to make mistakes. One of the most often quoted sportsperson, I think, is Michael Jordan. This is probably one of his best. People think about him, how amazing he is, and the success that he achieved in his basketball career. But that says it all, really. He's missed more than 9,000 shots in that, across the whole career, and lost that amount of games. And he's failed over and over again. But that is why he succeeds. So I mentioned earlier on about failing brilliantly. We are allowed to make mistakes, and failure is feedback. But somehow from childhood, the older we get, failure becomes a really negative word, and we fear it, and it stops us doing things, and it holds us back. But using those small successes, if there's something's not gone well, unpick it, find out why. Usually, if something hasn't gone as well as we wanted it to, there'll be parts of it that actually were okay or have gone really well. It's just the overall picture. And so often our brains are wired to find the negative bits. So something's gone wrong, that's what you picked on, and you've missed all this good stuff that worked really, really well. We're allowed to make mistakes, and you can say sorry for something that's happened, not for the whole of your life, but a particular mistake, and move on and use that feedback. Yvonne does amazing sessions around planning and vision, and that one of the key parts of that is to reflect on where we've come from, because that's how we know where we're going to go. So we reflect on the things that work well. I had all sorts of things wrapped up into the network when I first started. Those of you that have been around from the start, we had all sorts of different memberships that included all sorts of different workshops and coaching. And at the time it worked well, but as things developed, we changed. That's fine. We move on and we change things. I encourage you to think about that. And my Z. I talk about this quite a lot, and some of you will have heard me say it before. Language is key to how people perceive us, and the language that we use, not just about others, but more often about ourselves. And I hear that a lot. It's only just my little business. I had somebody the other day was introducing themselves. I've got this little business. It's not only, it's not nothing, and it's certainly not just. It's a really good way to think about what you're doing and changing how people perceive you, but most importantly, on how you perceive yourselves. It's one of the things that Sheryl Sandberg talks about in that book, Lean In, is women making themselves small. Now, I could talk for another hour about the impact on the media, not just social media, the media generally, on how women are perceived and how we are expected to behave. But think about the language that you use when you're writing emails to people. Just reread them and think about if there is anything in there, particularly if you're trying to get a contract or make a sale, own it, be you, not keep small. I think that's really, really important. And getting very close to the end. Yes, now I've put this, I will send you the link after the meeting when I send through the recording and the chat, if I'm guessing there's stuff in the chat. This is a test that I'm prohibited to send out, quite rightly. But Pauline Clance, the woman that did the original research, has got a test. There's 20 questions, and I've just copied the 10 up there because you haven't got the opportunity to do them. And there are scores provided with it, and it will give you a sense of where you are on her scale of, as I say, she calls it the imposter phenomenon. And, you know, as you'd expect from what I've said, things are on there. It's hard for me to accept compliments or praise about my intelligence or accomplishments. So she'll give you can do the test and you can have the scoring, and then you'll get a sense yourself of where you are with the on the scale of the imposter syndrome. Oh, super. There we go, guys. I hope that was a benefit. If anybody has any questions, here we are. We've still got 10 minutes left. That was good without looking at the... Feel free to wave at me if anybody has any questions or thoughts or anything, really.
Yeah, I think there's loads of relevant stuff in there to all of us. So there's lots of things that I recognise that are like, I think I put in the chat, I've just got pictures on the back here, whereas I won things in my previous roles and they're just in a box in the garage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Why are they in a box in the garage?
Well, I think because we moved from our old house, or my old house, into a house together with my husband. I've got a smaller office, and he was like, oh, well, why do you need them out? Just leave them in a box. And I don't think he was doing that in a
no
anything way, but I'm thinking, no, actually, well, I could just put them up the top there, and then they just at least remind me of what I've achieved, because I don't see them.
No, and I think that's right. I think it's like I said about celebrating successes. It's great to, you know, I run awards, and trying to get women to put themselves forward for awards. It's a huge boost to do something like that. And no, not everybody can win, but the amount of times I've had people send me emails when I write to everybody, say, I'm sorry, you've not got through to the finals, for example. And, you know, they've talked about the positivity of actually stopping and writing out an application, because that's caused them to look back to answer the questions. And when they look back, they've realised how far they've come, because we are so very good at just doing and keeping all those balls in the air and juggling. We don't always take time to stop and reflect on how far we've come, and that can make such a difference to you. So that's really important. And yes, if you've got amazing things, I've got some, you can't see mine, but they are scattered around my office, then have them up there, because we all get days when we feel a bit down or not very bright, and it can really, really lift you. Yeah, thanks.
I think we need to remember as well that as women, generally, we run households, families, and everything else as well, which is a business in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's two businesses, isn't it? We all work. And now with pandemic, there's so many women that are homeschooling as well.
Yeah.
Even more of a challenge. Brilliant. Thanks, Jo. Carly, yeah?
No, I was just going to make the observation that men usually earn more than women in their careers, and that it still goes on, and it's just very wrong. And I think a lot of what you're saying is maybe because of that women feel that they have to work so much harder to prove themselves just because they're women.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The gender pay gap is narrowed, but it is still, you know, particularly in certain industries, very, very different. And I've experienced it with women. You know, if you think about appraisals in some organisations, is why the pay is what the pay is based on. And, you know, the research is there that women will, if you have to do a self-assessment first, women will downgrade themselves considerably before they even, you know, get to the appraisal stage. So when it says, what do you think you are? They'll go low. Whereas men, when they have to fill out that self-assessment, go way up here. Maybe they have to be brought down a bit. But women are marking themselves down. And even if they've got a really good boss that will say, hang on a minute, no, you're not, you're this, 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 and this. In lots of organisations and industries, that's where the pay is decided. And, you know, doing all those different things and not putting yourself forward. And, you know, it's quite common for in the Springboard development program that I talked about, there's a character in there called Flossie. And Flossie is the woman in an organisation who puts her head down and works really hard. She trains everybody. She gets really grumpy because she sees all those blokes, they're not always blokes, standing around at the old water cooler having conversations, and they're talking to the boss, and it's not fair because I'm doing all the work. And Flossie's the one that gets looks over when it comes to promotion. They absolutely can't do without her in the role that she's doing. But she doesn't put her head up. She doesn't say, look at me, I want to do that. Many men will do that. And okay, they might be, I happen to love football, but they'll chat to the boss about football or whatever. It could be a female boss. And they're too busy working really hard and thinking they've got to prove themselves to do the internal networking in their own organisation. And that's inevitably what people will get promoted upon, is their, you know, how well they get on with everybody else. And we have a real role to play in being able to sell ourselves and promote ourselves. And that's the bit about arrogance at the very start, that if you talk to women about that, so often they'll see that as just alien to anything I could possibly do, because they're thinking of the extreme of the apprentice character. They're not thinking about having the ability to say, I'm really good at this, I think you should give me this job because you know how hard you work. All your friends in the tribe know how hard you work. But if you're going to get to a new contract, they've got no idea who you are, what you do. And you've got to tell them. And you've got to own that and tell them that you're going to be good at what you do. And lots of women do find that really, really hard. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. You know, I was brought up quite conservatively in a different country, obviously South Africa, where women are very submissive to men.
Mm.
But it's very interesting for me to see, I've got 3 daughters, to see how the evolution of upbringing is changing. And I'm very positive about how they're going to be. I think we are, unfortunately, us, the women in this room, are unfortunately the result of how we were brought up. And I think we're all changing it now. And that's great, because we're changing our daughters to be confident and not stand back for men. And, you know, I'm excited to see how they're going to perform when they're independent women and have kids, and their kids and their kids.
Yeah.
So it's all going to change.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. Anne, you wanted to say something earlier on, I think.
Yeah, just a quick comment. One of the things you said about just faking it, Jill. And it's amazing, as you say, you know, if you really almost psych yourself up and believe it, because the way we feel, different emotions feel very similar. So what you could be fear you're feeling, but actually you can turn that into upliftment or joy. And it's just about how you do that. And even by, as you say, visualization, we can cure all sorts of pains, for example, in our minds and body by visualizing it being healed. And there's been an awful lot of research done on that by just changing how we think. And that has this physiological changes and the physical changes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is, really is.
It's great how we can create what we want, really.
Absolutely. It's all within our gift, ladies.
It is. Absolutely it is.
If we're done then, ladies, it's lovely to see you. Don't forget, we've got, for the members in the room, I think everybody's members, we've got our Swim Online on the 28th. So please do come and join us there. And next week's Power Hour is getting your course online, which I'm really quite excited about hearing all about that from Beverly Poole. All right, everybody, have a super rest of your day. I'll see you all very soon.